I think that I do appreciate everybody's and the participation today's workshop. And I would like to express my utmost gratitude to the WCO Secretariat for having kind agreed to help us to undertake this necessary and highly requested event to build the capacity and expertise of the committee on HS related matters. And also to the WTO Secretariat for organizing the workshop. And I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the WCO Secretariat and also the chair of the HSC that they gave me a chance to address our discussions in HSC in person in Brussels last month. Just my secretary advised me to total number of the participants today is more than 170. So it's very good number. Then before we start, I would like to walk you briefly through the logistics of the event. First, please use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask questions to the panelists. I think the function is very useful when we use the Zoom format as effective as possible. And at the end of each session, we will open the floor for questions and comments. For those of you joining us virtually, please raise your hand so we can give you the floor. Once you have the floor, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera. To ensure the best possible interpretation, please use an external USB wired microphone. Please use external USB wired microphone. And finally, let me thank the interpreters for being with us over lunchtime. Turning now to the subject matter of today's workshop. As we all know, the harmonized system plays a key role in facilitating cross-border trade by providing a universal language for the coding and classification of goods. The HS is currently used by 211 economies, and over 98% of the merchandise trade is classified in terms of the HS. The maintenance of the HS is a WCO priority, but changes to the nomenclature can have an impact on the rights and obligations of WTO members, particularly with regard to their tariff commitments. As we all know, the HS is periodically updated in light of developments in technology and changes in trade patterns. The latest set of amendments, which entered into force on 1st January of this year, the HS 2022 introduced major changes on a wide range of goods and with the aim to address environmental and social issues of global concern, such as health and safety, protection of society, and the fight against illicit trade and terrorism. As the HS evolves, it is incumbent on WTO members to incorporate such changes in their national tariff nomenclatures and at the same time update their WTO schedules of concessions, which are the legal instruments recording tariffs and other commitments with respect to trading goods. This exercise, which is called transposition, is of paramount importance to ensure transparency and predictability of trade as it allows members and the trading community to compare the obligations undertaken by members in the WTO with the trade regimes that they apply in practice. With this introduction, and since we have quite the full program today, I would like to move on to today's workshop. The workshop is organized in 4 sessions today. In session 1, first session, the WCO Secretariat will offer an overview of the HS amendment procedures, in particular, the most recent one, the HS 2022. The second session, representatives from WTO members will share their experience with the implementation at the national level of the HS 2022 amendments. And the third session will start with an introduction by the WTO Secretariat of the HS transposition work in the Committee of Market Access. And finally, in the session 4, the WCO Secretariat will tell us more about the next review cycle, which is currently under negotiation at the WCO, which is the HS 2027. Let me welcome and thank all the speakers for their participation in this workshop. We want to commence the session 1 with the presentation from Ms. Gaia Gruby, Deputy Director of Tariff and Trade Affairs, WCO, who will be introducing that harmonized system and its amendment procedures. Gaia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. The transposition of duty rates, of course, starts and begins because we changed the HS. And we changed the HS for a wide number of reasons, but of course it does impact on our trade counterparts who need to look at the transposition of duties. So what I'd like to do today is at first just give a very brief overview of what happens with the HS to try and leave as much time later on in the sessions if you have any questions about the specifics. But if we have a look at this. So if we look at this, amending the HS, let's have a look at when, how, and why. So when, okay, June 2019 was when we had the HS 2022 recommendation to the Council. So I'm talking here for our current one. So that was the kickoff point for when we start the negotiations for the next HS. So September 21, the first meeting of the Harmonised System Committee after the Council is the start of negotiations for HS 2027. And from there we move on through the drafting until the last drafting meeting, which is our review subcommittee. So the review subcommittee is a drafting body in November 2023, and the last voting meeting for HS 2027 occurs in March 2024. Now, the reason for this and why it finishes so long before HS 2027 comes into force is that under the convention, when we send the recommendation to the WCO Council, which is our governing body, which will be in June 2024, there is 6 months for reservations, and then there is a 2-year period for national governments to work on things like the transposition of duty rates, as well as all of the other updates that are required in order to move to a new HS edition. So where are we on the timeline? Okay, we have next month an RSC, a review subcommittee, followed by next year, we have 2 HSCs and 2 RSCs and the final HSC in 24. So we only have 6 meetings left. So we are very much at the final last ditch, let's get these through stages of negotiations. And we do have a lot of items on negotiations. Unfortunately, with HS 2027, the pandemic, of course, hit at the start of pretty much the start of our negotiating period. So we only had one negotiating meeting beforehand. So obviously, countries had a lot of other things on their mind other than changes to the HS. So we are a little bit behind on this one, and we have a lot of proposals in front of us now. Okay, so how are amendments made? As I said, the review subcommittee, the HS review subcommittee is the drafting committee, and it makes changes by consensus. So the proposals come to us from our members, from intergovernmental bodies, occasionally even from the Secretariat itself, if we're doing so on behalf of things we've seen in the membership. And then once they have drafted either completely or to the point where they can no longer, they've reached the final consensus, there may still be a few things that have to be decided, it goes to the Harmonised System Committee and they vote. And to get a change through on the HS requires a 2/3 majority. Now, once a proposal achieves a 2/3 majority, it goes into the draft recommendation for the changes. And these are simply all gathered throughout this period. At the end of the negotiation period, so for this one, for June 2024, we then take that bundle of recommendations and the draft recommendation goes to our council for acceptance. And that requires 100% consensus. So they have a 6-month period. So far, we've been lucky, apart from one small change where we actually asked the council to reject it because there was a technical issue with it. All the changes have gone through smoothly. But that is the final hurdle for getting the changes through. And then you go into, after that 6-month period for reservations, you go into your 2 years where you have time to do all the national work, including the transpositions. And the WCO has time to do all of the work on the international side in terms of publications and updating all our tools and so on. Okay, so why are changes made? Well, the changes come for lots of reasons. A lot of them are to recognise the changes in the trade value of certain goods. So things become a major trade item, governments have an interest in the trade, so we have proposals from that. We also have a lot of changes, simply clarification changes. So where classification is very difficult. A good example of this, for example, would be the smartphones, where there were a number of countries who had court cases and problems with whether a smartphone was more than a telephone now. And likewise, we had a lot of requests for advices. So there was a proposal and a change made in HS 2022 to say they go with telephones, and they were given their own provision, simply to avoid these continuous legal disputes which some of our members were facing. The other type of change we have a lot of is reflecting goods that are restricted, monitored or controlled in international agreements. And the majority of these are in the MEAs, the multilateral environmental agreements. So we make changes to reflect the Montreal Protocol. We make changes to reflect Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, wide range of agreements, but also other areas like we do work for narcotics, we do work in relation to chemical weapons, we do work in relation to dual use goods. So anything where there's a need for governments to be able to monitor, control or restrict trade that is coming across the border, the HS is usually a good tool. So this is why it's set up to reflect these. We also do quite a lot, and increasingly so as the cycles have gone on, work to reflect societal needs. So, for example, for 2022, we put in provisions for rapid testing kits for viruses that were from the Aedes mosquito genus. So that was looking at things like Zika, which was very prevalent at the moment. And the idea of this, why one of our members proposed this, was if these rapid testing kits are separately classified in their own provision, then it's easier for customs to facilitate them going through very quickly. And it's also easier for health departments to know how many are coming into the country, so they can keep a better idea of stocks and so on, and also check if there's more coming in than actually authorised, if there's a problem with counterfeit. Of course, the original proposal was for ones for Zika, but one thing we do tend to do is we try to make these future-proof, because any proposal needs to have a decent lifespan. So we went of those particular types of mosquitoes, because that covered a number of pandemic potential or epidemic potential and epidemic actual viruses. And on top of that, of course, anything else that prompts a member or an intergovernmental organisation to send us a request. So there may be requests that reflect regional needs. There may be requests that reflect specific problems that have been encountered by a large number of our members in terms of tracking a particular trade. We get requests, for example, from FAO for food security purposes, which is societal needs again. But, you know, there are all sorts of ranges of reasonings behind proposals. So before we talk about the types of changes, I'd just like to talk a little bit and think a little bit about what the HS does, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around the world of how the HS works. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think the HS names goods. So people understand usually it's a taxonomic system, you classify things, but they're often more familiar with something like the classification of species. So you go through your species and you go right down to you get to species level, and a species level names a specific type of animal or a specific type of plant or a specific type of microbe. The HS doesn't actually do that, even though it may occasionally have provisions that are very specific that they do an effect name. It is actually not for naming goods. What it does, it places goods into categories. So it categorizes goods. It sorts goods to sort of a best match. So what you're really looking at is naming the baskets you're putting these in. So we want a basket here, and in this basket, we want electric vehicles with an electric motor for propulsion only. And we will then find the goods and put them in there. And of course, when you get a best match category, you find that you can have many, many different types of goods in a single provision, because it's usually a best fit for more than one type of product. But as they're categories, the HS codes can use different criteria. So, for example, you could have classifications that speak of the material, you could have classifications that speak of the functions, you could even have ones that use names, or even areas of use, like equipment for use in agriculture. You can have overlap between what those different baskets contain. And that's why we have the general interpretive rules, which legally govern classification, and the legally binding notes. So your section notes, your notes, and your subheading notes. And the entire purpose of this is to clarify where goods go to resolve overlaps and to make sure goods go in the right places. So, you know, if you have something that says other articles of wood and you have something that says other furniture or parts thereof, you could spend a long time in court arguing which one it should go to. So we have legal notes, for example, that tell you, in this case, for example, that chapter 44 will not cover any articles of chapter 94. So that makes it nice and clear where it goes to. So this is why just reading the terms alone is not enough. to be able to see where your goods are going to belong if you're looking at what's the effect is going to be of a change on a specific good. You need to also understand the notes and the general interpretive rules, which give the power to the notes and terms. Okay, and the other thing that a lot of people, when talking to us, particularly in the private sector, don't understand is the HS has always classified all tradable goods, all tradable physical goods. So if it can cross a border as a physically tradable good, it has a classification, and it has had a classification since 1988. It might be that that classification is other goods of plastic, other, but it will have a classification. And I said, we often get people come in and say, look, I've invented this wonderful new good. There's no classification for it. No, it's always there. So it's always had a classification, and therefore it's also had a duty rates provision as well, because of course the two are intimately bound. So if we look at something that's new, for example, machines for additive manufacturing by plaster, cement, ceramics, or glass deposit. So 3D printers that print plaster, print cement, print ceramics, or print glass. Okay, and they were still classified in HS 2017, either under 847529 as other machines for working glass, or for the other ones under 847989, which is just other machines, other having individual functions not elsewhere specified. Now, in terms of the types of changes that we make within the HS, the easiest types of changes we make are where you have a one-to-one correlation. So, okay, the goods were over here in 340213, and now they're going to 340242. That's nice and simple for everyone. We all love these ones. It's easy for the transposition of duty rates. It's easy for the correlation of scope. Unfortunately, there's not always that many of those. Sometimes what we have is we have a situation where we need to split a code. So, for example, we split 441294 into 3 codes. 441251, 441252, and 441259. So this gave us more precision. Again, it's relatively easy because you know that everything that was in 441294 is now in one of those 3 codes. So it's quite simple to handle. A little bit more complicated, one-to-many. So for 846599, for example, well, a lot of the goods stayed there, but we took some out and we put them into 848590. Actually, we've gotten the wrong way around. So 846590 to 848590. So in that case, some goods will move, but only some goods. So a lot of goods will remain in the old heading and only a small minority. So for transposition of duty rates, it's a little bit more complicated. For transposition of origin rules, it's a little more complicated. Then we have multiple to one. So we take goods from multiple codes and put them into one. And the first situation here is relatively simple. We've gone, okay, we're going to take the goods of 251830 and we're going to have the goods of 3816, and we're going to make all of those goods now into 3816. Again, quite simple. And usually we do things like this where there's a really low volume of trade. Remember, my first one I really was quite sorry about was when typewriters disappeared and they went into another heading. So this is the sort of thing that happens there. Sometimes, of course, we do it the other way around. We take multiple headings and put them into a single, so we do it slightly more difficult. So 040310 went to 041020, and so did a small amount of 190190, because we changed the definition of yogurts, which made it simpler for classification, but it means some of those goods that couldn't have been classified as yogurts beforehand, because they had, a few additives, made their chocolate chips or something in them, and we're in 1901, suddenly went back to yogurts. So you get a little few changes here. And then, of course, going further up the chain of complexity, many to many. So some of the goods of 0410 would have gone to 041010, a new yogurt classification, but not all of those. So we can get a little bit more complicated. Of course, the worst one for all of us is when you have a very complex many to many. So this one was for insects, edible insects. Now we had two problems here. Not only did they come from all over the place into different headings, we also had members who could not agree where they are now. The whole idea of the HS is we have uniform classification, and all of our members will agree to 6 digits as to where they are. But we all know that in reality, sometimes life is not that easy. So for this one, the big argument was whether insects were meat or not. So countries, depending on whether they believed they were meat or non-meat, had them in different places. So we have a really complex change here. And we try to avoid this. We try to get around these sort of problems by agreeing on a classification beforehand, before we make the changes. But unfortunately, sometimes it happens. And the other time you will get this happening is when we make a classification for a specific part. And say at the moment, okay, HS 2022 change, we made a change for flat panel display modules. Now this is an intermediate part. So it's the part that will go into these screens, to your laptop, your mobile phone, to the ICU unit at the hospital, to the machines that are selling your train tickets. They're basically an intermediate product that goes into anything with a flat panel display. But prior to having their own classification, which was perfectly justified because they're a massive element of trade, and plus they're awful to classify before then, they were classified as parts of the machine they would have belonged to. So they might have been parts of an ICU machines, or parts of a ticketing vending machine, or parts of a telephone, mobile telephone, or parts of a computer, or parts of a electronic machine for controlling welding. So they were all over the place. So there are times where you may be wondering, why are we causing you so much pain? It's pain in the name of good. It really is helpful in the future to have some of these products having their own provision. So we do apologize, but sometimes you will have some very painful transitions of transpositions for duties. Okay, so just to go back and emphasize this again, there are no new goods added to the harmonized system, only new provisions for goods already classified elsewhere. And that's why we have problems like the insects and the parts, the flat panel display units, or some of the semiconductor parts we did in 2017, is because they are already classified, sometimes in many places, and not very easy to find. And the other reason I would like to say is that one of the reasons to do this is to in the trade statistics for the first time. So if we have a look at this one, electric beam furnaces. In 2017, these were classified under 851430, which simply covers other furnaces and ovens. And then in 2022, we made a specific subheading for 851431 for electric beam furnaces. Now you may go, why? It's such a specific item. Why would we make this? And that's because it's a dual use item. So there are problems with the diversion of trade for these for certain weapons, basically terrorist goods. So there are a few goods like that where we made them visible. And what this does, of course, is enables customs to be able to see the legitimate trade and have a better chance of also seeing where it's diverted into illicit trade. So sometimes we do things for reasons like this, but it also shows you exactly what it does, and why we often split things out is because if they're not split out and they're grouped with other goods, you just do not see them. They're there, they're in the statistics, but not as themselves. They're just, in this case, they were in there just as other furnaces and ovens, which covers a wide variety of industrial and laboratory and even, you know, not domestic, but laboratory and manufacturing equipment. Now, if you need more information on the correlations, we produce, after each edition, this really handy book. And basically what it does, it gives you long lists of the changes. You won't probably be able to see this on here. It says where goods are in 2017, where they're going in 2022, and some commentary on what the goods are and why they're moving. It also has our correlation tables and various other useful information. So very, very useful. I certainly know it was very, very useful back in my national administration when we had to do the transpositions. Particularly also if you're doing not only transpositions to the WTO, but you're doing transpositions of origin rules, because there it's often very, very important to be able to understand what goods exactly are moving. So just a little plug for that particular book. And that's the end. And of course, I'm happy to take questions, but over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Gail, for your insightful presentation from the expert, the WCO expert point of view. It's very informative from WTO CMA side, especially you introduce certain specific elements such as the difficulty to have a negotiation with a certain product, which cover more than 6 chapters. For example, the insects as food. Such kind of, I understand this negotiation among the members is not easy. And also we take note of your announcement for the publish the handy book for the WCO. Then I would like to invite the members for the comment and the question. And also, if necessary, I would like to ask the Secretary to facilitate the discussion on this specific matter. Any other comments or question? Okay, Mary, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to the presenter of the program. Actually, first of all, let me thank you very much. I've been doing customs clearing for quite a number of years. And looking at the tariff books, I didn't know what it meant when we have those charts in the book. At least today I've got insights. But please briefly, if you could come again to the explanation, maybe just in a synopsis, where you said there's 1-to-1, then 1-to multiplication, then again M to M. I would want to understand more on that, Madam. Sorry to take you back. Thank you.
Very happy to answer on this. Okay. Because of course nothing's new in the HS, everything we put in, every time we make a new provision, it's going to come from somewhere. Now, the simplest case is where we are simply just moving things from one provision to another. And this is often because we've restructured the provisions and we simply need to move things. And a 1-to-1 is very rare. But what it does is just simply says everything that was in this subheading is now going to be in this subheading. So it's nice and easy. Unfortunately, there's not many of those, because what we're normally trying to do is we're normally trying to do one of two things. We're normally trying to consolidate. So we don't need these particular subdivisions anymore, so we're going to merge them. Or we're trying to highlight different types of goods. So we could be, for example, saying, all right, we want to now cover all electric vehicles, for example. So when we started making provisions for electric cars, we had those cars previously classified. Well, no, that's a bad example because they were another. They didn't have a motor. But say we're trying to classify a particular machinery for agriculture, for example, that has previously been classified by the type of machine. This is a hypothetical example because it's not one we've done. So we might have had some of them in threshing machinery, and we might have had some of them, for example, in harvesting machinery. We might have some of them in processing machinery. We say, okay, hypothetically, we want all the vineyard industry machinery in one place. In that case, then we'd be taking from many to one. And this is what we did, for example, with semiconductor parts, force, transistors, and a few other things like this. We took things from many places into one. The other thing we might be trying to do is just trying to pull out a subset of something and say we want to highlight this particular subset of goods. So if that subset of goods crosses the boundaries of multiple headings, that again is many to one. So we might say we're not moving all the vineyard things. So let's say we want to move, let's say we want to move mice laptops. We wouldn't do this. This would be a painful one to do, but say we wanted to move mice laptops, and we wanted to move it into a heading where we subdivided the mice into wireless and wired. So we would be moving from one to multiple in that case, because mice at the moment have a particular classification. We'd be splitting them into wired and wireless. But we would not be taking all mice, so we'd also be doing one of the EX movements. In terms of multiple to multiple, that is really, really complex. And multiple to multiple and multiple to one, the biggest time, as I said, when you're doing that is when you're creating a group that has never existed before. So all the goods are classified, but have never existed, the groups never existed before, like say we wanted to do wired and wireless mice, like we do insects, like we did flat panel display modules. And this is where you get the complexity, because at no point were they classified under these sort of criteria as a specific type of good. So the idea, for example, of a flat panel display module, even though it's a well-known trade commodity, there was no concept of it as a commodity in the HS because it was classified only as a part. So we're creating a new identity. So the goods are classified, but never with their own identity. And that's where you're getting the multiple to multiple. The tricky thing is to work out exactly what is moving. So if you have only a small part of goods moving out of a subheading, you really do need to understand the basis for the move. And you need to look at the text of the new subheading to understand the scope. Because remember what I said is a best fit. So when we do the correlation tables, we don't say that all of these goods, if we're doing many to many, one to many, many to one. For the many, we don't tell you really what goods are moving because we don't have the list of exact goods that are moving. We're saying any goods that are in this heading that now fit the terms of this heading are going to move. So that's where your complexity comes in, particularly for rules of origin shifts, but also potentially duty shifts. I'm not sure if that quite answers what you want, but I will emphasize the correlations don't tell you exactly what. Then
at least
they will tell
you
you
have
for how.
answered my. Yeah, I do understand now what you mean. Yeah, that in some places there's some complexities.
Yes.
But I don't know whether it is complexities or whether you have mentioned, because normally the tariff book where they have not classified an item, they'll always say any other that has been not classified elsewhere, just to cover something that has not been done. I don't know whether that's where that's where you are driving at. Thank you very much, madam. Otherwise, I've understood what you're saying.
I'm really sorry for having to interrupt here. We're running a bit late of time and we have one more question from the chat also here. Let me ask this question to Gael before we move on. You mentioned that there are no new goods added to the HS, but then the question is, but what about new products like selfie sticks that did not exist 10 years ago? How has this been dealt with in the HS? Maybe you can go back to that. Thank you.
Okay, I can answer this one very quickly. Thank you. Things like that, you usually have found they were classified. A selfie stick was classified before they existed. We've now got a heading for them. I think prior to that, they would have been under parts. They were not an accessory. That have been either under accessories, if we had an accessory heading for cameras, or they would have been other items of metal or other items of plastic, other. And that's where those other items not elsewhere specified or included come in. So they would have had a classification. Otherwise, you couldn't import them.
Thank you. And another one more question from the chat.
Yes, just very quickly, there's one more question from the chat, which is on a bit specific, which is about rules of origin transposition. Is this mandatorily done by customs, or what is the procedure usually in rule of origin and also for customs evaluation purposes?
That depends on the national administration and the way they're set up. So which agency does it, and how it's done, or how often it's done, and whether it's done with every edition. For FTAs, that would depend on the individual agreement. For non-preferential rules, usually not so affected, but again, that's administration by administration. There's no universal rule for that.
Thank you, Gael.
Thank you very much, Gael. And thank you very much for the intervention from the floor, as well as the question from the using the chat. Is very useful. The little bit times we are run out of time to complete the session until 3 o'clock. So I would like to suggest to move on to the next session. Next session is on the program. Is about experience sharing session by members on the introduction of the HS 2022 amendment at the national level. As indicated in the program beforehand we shared, there are 3 guiding questions for this session. First, what are the main challenges faced by members with the implementation of the HS 2022? And a second question, how did interagency coordination work? And a third, what other stakeholders involved? Then to commence this session, we would like to invite 5 presenters from Cambodia, China, and Ecuador, Maldives, and United States. I'd like to invite Mrs. Shan-Sophie Ook Chief of Free Trade Office, and Miss Nani Kim, Chief of HS Classification from Cambodia, to take the floor.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me and my colleague to make a presentation. First of all, I would like to say very good morning and good afternoon to Mr. Chair and Ms. Gal, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself. That my name is Ukjan Supip, Chief of the Free Trade Office. Today, my colleague, Ms. Nali, and I are delighted to be invited to attend this very important workshop as a guest speaker. And we are going to make a presentation about the national experience sharing on the implementation of the HS 2022. Do you see my slides clearly? Should I project or let to confirm?
We can see the slides clearly. Can you put them in full screen mode, please? Perfect. Now it's excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In this content consists of 4 points. The first one, membership in the international agreement. The second, engagement in the development of ASEAN Harmonized Tariff Nomenclature, AATN 2022. Third one, development of national custom tariff 2022. And the last one is challenge. Actually, I'm going to present the first and the second, and my colleague, Ms. Nali, will present the third and the fourth one. As you've seen in the slide, there are a number of international agreements that Cambodia is a membership in ASEAN, WCO, HS Convention, International Customs Cooperation, and Revised Kyoto Convention, and also WTO TFA. You can see here that 2002 that we became a member of HS Convention. I also would like to inform you that Cambodia Customs Officer have attended the HSC meeting by online as an observer. And we haven't done the voting on the HSC result of the discussion. This is because of our financial constraint. Hopefully that we will get permission and approval from our DG to send the officer to attend in person. And for the engagement in development in 2022. As you may know that Cambodia is of the ASEAN country, consists of the 10 members that you can see here, that consists of the 10 members. That there is the protocol governing in the implementation of the AATN. That protocol was signed in 2003, and there was 2 subsequent amendments in 2004 and 2010. And this was formed in integral part of the ASEAN Agreement on Customs 2012. And there are of the ASEAN member states that stipulate in the Article 4 of the AATN protocol that member states shall abide by the HS code that you already seen from the Ms. Gal presentation already, that we as all ASEAN members abide by the HS code, including the general rule or the interpretation of the harmonized system, section, chapter, and subheading note, and its amendment there. And all member states shall apply the AATN up to the 8-digit level for the trades transaction for tariffs, the collection of statistical data and other purpose. And also member state may further subdivide the AATN beyond the 8-digit level for the collection of the statistical data or other non-tariff purpose. You can see here that HS 6 digit and plus 2 digit that the AATN they are 8 digit. That for the digit 7 and digit 8 is AATN subheading. You can see from the slide. And since 2018, that Cambodia, also 9 ASEAN member states start the participation with the ASEAN sub-working group. That you can see that the ASEAN technical sub-working group on the classification to review the AATN 2017. And Cambodia also consult domestically with the private sector for preparation of the Cambodia proposal. And following August 2020 and until August 21, until the endorsement on the AATN 2022 text in August 2021. And in the parallel, the development of National Custom Tariff 2022 had begun. We also start the translation of the validated amendment of the AATN 2017. You can see here that the development of the AATN 2022 before the COVID pandemic, that since 2018 until end of 2022, that we attend the meeting in person. You can see that the first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, fourth meeting, and fifth meeting, that we start by preparation of the review of the AATN 2017 and set the timeline, technical criteria and procedure and work program. And we also divide that to review from chapter to chapter for each meeting. And you can see here that the COVID, the virus COVID pandemic, that we had start the meeting by online and was the email intersessionally, that we try our best even that there is the pandemic. It is we start in the first intersessionally 2022, second intersessional meeting, and third international meeting, and then start the sixth meeting online, and following 7 meeting. And following we still attend the meeting online 2021 and share the comment by email, and had the 9 meeting including the exchange the view by email for the 10 meeting and also actually for the 9 meeting and the 10 meeting we had attend the meeting online and change the view by email. And finally we had the 11 meeting for the endorsement process, and we received the endorsement all the member on 20 December 2021. So for the remaining presentation, I give the floor to Ms. Kim Nali to make the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miss Sophie Oak, for your insightful presentation, explaining your experience for engagement in the development in the AHTN in the among the ASEAN membership. Then next, I would like to invite Miss Jingwan Cheng, officer at the General Administration of Customs of China, to take the floor for the.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair, that my colleague haven't finished the slide presentation yet. So
Sorry.
give
Sorry.
the floor to Ms. Nali. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Good
Please.
afternoon, Mr. Kanya Yuhara and Masker Grubi and distinguished delegates and guests. Thank you very much for allowing me to take part of this presentation from my college. And I would like to continue the presentations in the development of our National Custom Tariff 2022. In connection to her presentation, previous slide is all about our engagement in the development of the AHTN 2022. And in parallel to the development of the AHTN 2022 and with our commitment to have the nomenclature to be implemented on time by the 1st January 2022, we have conducted domestically any activity related to the transposition of the tariff from the AHTN 2017 to 2022. As informed by Ms. Okjansapip that the AHTN correlation table development has been completed during the 9th TSWGC meeting. So with this reference, Cambodia has transposed all our tariff line from the AHTN 2017 to AHTN 2022 for the purpose of custom tariff and in our internal taxes. And also, we have used this correlation table as reference to the transpositions of any AHTN code used domestically for a relevant legal instrument, such as for the risk purposes in our core system, automated system, and also for the prohibited and restricted goods list which need the import export licensing, transit licensing, or subject to prohibition. Those relevant instrument needs to be transposed from the AHTN 2022 as well. And we also keep participating in the 10 TSWGC meeting. During the meeting, we also have discussed about some amendment to our endorsed AHTN 2022. That's what we call is our AHTN 2022 curriculum. There are more than 30 technical errors, but it's some subject to some kind of punctuation and some just a one-line deletion to the AHTN 2022. And we also participate in the WCO workshop on 8S 2022, conducted during November 2021. And finally, the domestic regulation processing for the endorsement of the Cambodia Custom Tariff 2022 for implementation by 1st January 2022 completed during the end of November 2021. And our relevant regulation instrument also done at the same time. Please go to the next slide. So here, all our domestic regulations endorsed for the for the Cambodia custom tariff to be implemented by 1st January 2022. So we come up to the dissemination and the implementation. So during December of 2021, we also have notified the endorsement on the mandate AHTN 2022 tax with Carigandam. As well, we have conducted 2 seminars on the implementation of custom tariff, our national custom tariff, by video conference because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We can do it in we cannot do it in a physical manner. So we have also transposed a regulation related to risk management and FTA tariff reduction schedule. And also we have also conducted a meeting on the AHTN 2022 simulation testing in our automated custom clearance system to make sure that by the 1st January 2022, the system will not go wrong. Yes. And during December 2021, we also published our national custom tariff book. By the 1st January 2022, all the import and export declaration has been indicated the AHTN 2022, and the duty and tax rate of the new year 2022 also applied by the 1st January. And we also met availability of custom tariff 2022 in our custom website and mobile application. And the next event we have done is 4 workshops on the tariff classification has been conducted. 2 workshops for our custom officers, one in a physically manner and another one in the virtually manner. And other 2 workshops also provided for the stakeholders. And the next activity we have to do is we also been transposing FTA, the product specific rule, and the tariff reduction schedule as well. Please go to the next slide. Here is our national custom tariff 2022 structure. In our custom tariff 2022 structure, we have our AHTN codes and description in Khmer and English with below structure. So it means that we have adopted the whole structure of our of the Asian harmonized tariff nomenclature. And we also have the unit of measurement and the MFN rates, our custom duty rate, and other tax rate, our internal tax policy tax rate. Sorry. So by the
Excuse me for interrupting you. Can I ask you to please conclude in a minute? We're a bit behind schedule. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So by the look at our structure, you can see that it's the same as the 8S structure. AS 2022 structure. The section heading, subheading, and we have just only add one more chapter is 98 our internal internal use, such as post market and special transaction not classified according to the kind. So here our Cambodia custom tariff 2022 come up with 430 tariff line. It's only the plus 16 tariff line about AHT and subheading because of our chapter 98 has 16 tariff line. Okay, so next please. So that's all for my presentation, and the constraining regarding to the implementation of the AS 2022 is only about the limited human resource time constraining because of the COVID-19 pandemic, barrier to all kind of physical trainings. And also we have time constraint to do the transposition of all FTAs that the Cambodia is member to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cambodian delegation, and apologize to the skip the presentation, the second presenter from the Cambodia. But again, they appreciate your both presentation, Mrs. Shamso Fees, as well as Miss Nan Lee Kim. And then I now invite Miss Jing Won Chang, officer at the General Administration of Customs of China, to take the floor. Before the to start the presentation, I'd like to ask the remind you for the presenter to keep the 10 minutes maximum of the time allocation for the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Jingwan Chen from China Customs. Today, I'd like to share with you some experience from China Customs here in the context of HS 2022 implementation and transposition. My presentation covers 4 parts. First is a brief overview of China Customs. The second part is about our national HS classification sectors. Then is the implementation of HS 2022 in China, and our national coordination regarding the HS 2022. So this slide is the overview of China Customs. It's a general administration of customs of the People's Republic of China. In short, GACC. We have Guangdong Sub-Customs Administration, we have Tianjin Supervision Office, Shanghai Supervising Office, and 42 regional customs districts.
Can you please put your presentation in full screen mode? We can only see the first slide still. Thanks.
Here, but I already put it in full screen, so okay,
you have to start.
It's right?
No, I think it's a problem with a separate screen, but please go ahead and move the slide like this.
Okay. So we have 42 regional customs districts and 2 customs schools. And we have a total of 678 local customs houses nationwide. But I already click next slide, but you could not see them, right?
1 second, we will share from our side.
Okay, then I try to do it like this. Maybe it's better.
We can see slide 4 now.
Right? Okay, let's do it in this way. Thank you. So mission of China Customs. GACC exercise the foreign responsibilities like customs control and anti-smuggling, trade statistics. Customs classification is one of it, and also performs health checks at points of entry. Also takes sanitary and photosanitary measures to safeguard our land and our people, protects imported and exported food safety, inspects imported and exported consumer products and bulk commodities. When it comes to national HS classification sectors, I'd like to show you that we have 3 customs national supervision bureaus for duty collection. In this way, the Department of Duty Collection in the GACC is in charge of planning, guidance, legislation preparation, correspondence, maintaining database, dispute settlement, and organizing training. The 3 customs national supervision bureaus for duty collections are responsible for the whole process of duty collection and relevant risk analysis, including HS classification, valuation, rules of origin, etc. In terms of classification, 3 bureaus take on different chapters as shown in this slide. The bureaus locate in 3 different megacities, Beijing, our capital, and Shanghai and Guangzhou. The duty collecting unit of each regional customs is in charge of routine classification work. Where classification disputes or problems occur, the duty collecting unit should refer the matter to one of the bureaus for advice. China Customs and the US, and HS, sorry. In 1987, China Customs translated the HS into Chinese and started to convert the Chinese tariff under the structure of HS nomenclature. China Customs has been the member of the HS Convention since July 1992. In the same year, HS entered into force in China. Therefore, commodity classification became one of the earliest law enforcement practices, which was in line with the international standard. Year 2022 marks the 30th anniversary to the application of the HS in China. So we also use 8-digit code based on HS. As a contracting party of the HS Convention, China had completely implemented 1992, 1996 until the latest version of the HS. So for the HS 2022, we work very closely with other ministries, have their views on the HS-based Chinese tariff, make suggestions and monitor the supply chain. Bear in mind that the classification changes for the chain are immense. We continuously endeavor to help our importers and exporters, especially SMEs, to ease their concerns, facilitate trade and ensure compliance. Meanwhile, China provided valuable comments during the HS review cycles. For instance, China submitted proposal for amendments in the HS 2022 relating to microbial oil products. Let's take a look at this one. This is about the HS classification of microbial oils. The aim of the proposal is to clarify the classification of this kind of oils obtained through fungi fermentation. Back in 2016, China requested the Harmonized System Committee examine the classification of microbial oils. There were 3 headings that could be considered for classification. That was 1506. It's other animal fats and oil. Heading 1515, other fixed vegetable fats and oils. And heading 2106 is for other food preparations. The key question was whether fungi is treated as an animal or a plant for the purpose of the HS classification. And following the decision of the committee, a consensus was reached with the committee that microbial oils had a chemical structure similar to an oil, and it should be classified in heading 1515. And then the review subcommittee examined the amendments to the legal texts to clarify the classification of this kind of new products, taking into account the technological process made in this regard. So we have this new subheading 15-1560, especially for microbial fats and oils and their fractions, and also new subheading 15-16-30 for this kind of product. And following these changes and to other chapters like chapter 27, chapter 38, and also let me see, heading 8438 and subheading 8479-83 also add microbial fats and oils there. So following the WCO amendment in the HS 2022, this recommendation includes 351 sets of accepted amendments. Following this, China has made over 830 amendments in our national tariff nomenclature. During the review cycle of HS 2022, China Customs sent 96 representatives to participate in the discussion of all technical classification issues, and also for their exploratory notes. So I will share you this flow chart. It's the basic process we need to go through for the implementation of each new version of the HS. First and foremost, translation. I'm sure this is the same for all non-native English or French-speaking countries. And then the translated text will be sent to other border agencies or competent authorities such as Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Agriculture, etc. After the examination and approval by the Tariff Management Committee, we will start conversion to our national tariff. Meanwhile, any relevant questions arise will also go to the consultation step. The new tariff in compliance with the HS 2022 will officially be implemented after the legislation process is finished. So this is the timeline. China Customs issued the announcement on the HS 2022 and the explanatory notes at the end of the year 2021. So our main challenges, first is translation, yes, and then the transition of the national tariff, and then training for customs and the trade. I summarize them as 3 T's. This translation also involves consultation with other border agencies and all competent ministries. And also we need comprehensive product information, including pictures to choose the accurate Chinese word to be used in the national tariff. And the transition stage, also we went through the consultation and also have their views and
Sorry
also
for interrupting. Can we ask you to conclude, please? Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So when we go to the last stage, is the summarized one, is to ensure our users to get accurate legal basis for the commodity classification. We prepare detailed training materials. We set an expert team was to update text items. So this is the brief, very brief introduction from my side. Any questions is welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chan, for your informative the presentation. Because of the time constraint, you missed some part, but your presentation document is going to be shared among the members. And then we move on to the third speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Santiago Sanchez, official of the Undersecretariat of Negotiations of the Ministry of Foreign Trade of Ecuador. Mr. Sanchez, sorry. We look forward to your presentation.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Chair. Can you tell me if you can see the presentation on the screen?
Sí, hola, la vemos, pero si por favor la podrías
Yes, we
poner
can see it,
pantalla
but could you please
más grande?
put it in full screen?
Si no, Santiago, si quieres lo podemos poner de nuestro lado. A ver.
Otherwise, we can share it from our side, Santiago.
Sí, perfecto, gracias. Sí, gracias.
Thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. I will present Ecuador's case, and we will look at the three main questions to address. And perhaps not according to the order that they were put forward, but as they have arisen for us. One of the first challenges that we had to face was having a group, a consolidated group. And so we have met as the interagency technical ad hoc group to address this issue, led by these institutions, namely the National Customs Service of Ecuador, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Central Bank of Ecuador, and the Ministry of Production, Foreign Trade, Investment and Fisheries. And here it's important to take into account that any tariff measure in our country, any raising of tariff, reduction of tariff, or change to the tariff applied has an impact on taxation. The Ministry of Finances therefore does have to sign off on any such measure. And so these are the main key institutions that work in this area. And therefore, coordination was important, and this has been carried out in our two largest cities. First of all, in Quito, the capital, where we have most of the institutions on the screen, except the customs agency, which is in Guayaquil, our main port. And we do have a headquarters, a base there in Guayaquil for issues relating to customs, with everything else relating to production headquartered in Quito. This is a platform, this group, that we have various ministries working through that. So it made it a lot easier to coordinate among ourselves on these matters, on customs. There might have been issues that we needed to clarify with greater detail. And again, through this platform, someone in the team in the same building can be called. So this made our logistics far more flexible. So we have these two headquarters, one in the capital and another in our main port. And we saw a whole round of meetings during 2 months, going one by one through different issues relating to transposition. The Secretary General of the Andean Community, supported by the customs of all of the members of the Andean Community, had already structured transposition up to 8-digit level. And we were looking at everything related to tariffs domestically at 10-digit level.
So then which were the institutions invited? We have issues such as e-cigarettes. We had persons invited from the Ministry of Public Health, the Ministry of Energy and Mining, into the Internal Revenue Service, which manages anything relating to taxation, the National Health Regulation Control and Surveillance Agency, that all work on such specific matters, the Energy to Regulate and Control Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources for mining issues, for example. And then with the Andean community, we also had to undertake various consultations to know how a tariff group had worked. And for example, we had such consultation with Colombia or with the Secretary General of the Andean community to know how the countries of that community were working. That was a good support. Then, of course, the private sector. This within the meetings that we carried out at country level. And then we also went further for more detailed consultations with the market access team at the WTO that we continue to cooperate with. Here we have the main challenges that we faced. First of all, as I commented, it was setting up an interagency technical ad hoc group. And we are working, as I have mentioned. Then the main challenge that we had was reviewing tariffs under correlated headings that did not carry over the bound duties. Here we had some experience with this type of review to ensure that we do not exceed our bound level with applied tariffs. So everything that we reviewed was in detail to ensure that first we could check that none of the applied tariffs exceeded the bound rate. The second problem, which took a little more time, was the issue of having correlations that are single line in one version with various lines in the older version with various different applied tariffs. And here you can see a clear example of what I am referring to. Here we have 3 lines. One of the tariff lines in the 2017 HS has a 0% tariff. The second line has a 10% tariff. And the third line has a 20% tariff. These 3 lines, or part of these 3 lines, give rise to this new single line in the HS 2022. And what tariff do we apply to that? Here, by our domestic legislation, as I commented, if there is any raising or reduction of the tariff that has a direct taxation implication, this has to be signed off by the Ministry of Finance. And it's the Committee on Foreign Trade, which is a technical interministerial delegation that look into these matters, as I mentioned at the beginning. And so there are different positions around this kind of problem. And this situation applied to some 156 lines. So we met with Roy's team, with the market access team. We looked into what would happen methodologically with this, together with this ad hoc group. And we were able to look at resolving some of these issues. With the result being what we could call a harmonized fiscal impact among the different ministries involved. We were all able to identify the problems, analyze, and produce a tariff which has a sustained basis, sustained by data. So this was a fiscal impact, that a taxation impact that we had managed to clarify. We had technical meetings, a technical report was produced, and this went through to the Committee on Foreign Trade. This is then to be reviewed by all of the institutions involved for approval and adoption by the different ministers. This has required a huge amount of work among all of the different institutions. It's the first time that we were able to work in this way.
Por lo cual no teníamos the couple of minutes.
Eso es la primera vez que hacemos un.
This is the first time that we were able to work with a methodology of this kind, where we were able to meet at the same time among all of the institutions participating in this process under the Committee on Foreign Trade. Now, this brings me to the end of what I had to share, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. And then I would like to invite next speaker, Ms. Fetimas Naz Youssef, Chief Customs Officer at the Customs Support Center of the Maldives. You have the floor. Miss Fetimas Naz Youssef,
Yes.
please start. Thanks.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see.
Thank you for giving the opportunity. I'm Fatwat Naz Joseph. I welcome distinguished guest and especially thank you for giving me this opportunity to represent Maldives. So in my presentation, I try to include mainly the transfer process which we conduct in Maldives. So before starting the presentation, I would like to give few information regarding our Maldives Customs Service. In 2021 statistics, our importation is around 2.5 billion US dollars and exportation is 149 FOB value, that is. And we use in Maldives 10 digits. So we provide all the statistic information trade for the government, and statistic is a huge part of customs responsibility in Maldives. In 2021, there was 204,635 declarations submitted to customs. In my presentation, it is included which parties are involved on implementation of HS 2022 and high bounded rates, how stakeholders awareness process was, challenges we face while implying to HS 2022, and also the assistance we are providing from all these customs services to stakeholders. So involving parties are parliament. From the parliament approval only, we could employ HS 2020 HS related issues. So this is implied on our import-export law, which is governed by Ministry of Economic Development. All the awareness and other assistance are provided by Maldives Customs Services. So implementation process start as intergovernment agency discussion was conducted on 2021. From there, the Ministry of Economic Development draft the amendment of import-export law. After that, it was sent to Parliament, and from Parliament approval, it was resent to Ministry of Economic Development for awareness session for government agencies. And from there, initiation was taken from Maldives Customs to conduct the awareness session. So from HS 2022, this year we have highlighted areas for high bond rates, and 2017 was a huge change in government process where was established another taxation. GST was established. So we 2017 the main focus was to reduce the rates. And here 2022 tariff implementation main focus was to conduct society protection, and from there health, cigarette, tobacco, soft drink, energy drinks, sugary products was included on this high tariff rates, and social for weapons, religions purpose high rates were included pork, liquor, environment protection. We noticed from past statistics that their used vehicles are imported very and the government policy has been established to single-use plastic. So awareness was conducted on December 2021 for all stakeholders. So on 2017 we noticed that it was very huge challenge to conduct awareness session. So, but this year due to COVID, we turned it for online awareness session more productive for us, because to bring the traders into one place is very difficult. So we conduct mainly from mass media and online awareness, but some traders like regular importers were brought it here, and brokers, they were provided special training on how to classify this. So mainly the traders, custom broker, port authorities and freight shipping agents, local public and custom officers were included this session. So it is a huge challenge for us to classify on some areas. Chapter like 28, 29, chemical and other byproduct, it's difficult, and chapter 30, 39, because the single-use plastic and cosmetics, chapter 85, 87, 89, and continuous change in technology. For us, it is a challenge. So main challenge is public awareness, because general public, a very small trade community knows about the tariff rulings and other impact on community So we are, it is in our strategic plan to conduct awareness on tariff rulings and other areas on tariff. So right now it is ongoing, and classifying commerce item, because we don't have a lab here, it was difficult us to facilitate. We have to attend other foreign aids even to conduct these classifications. And Maldives Religions Act, there are a lot of product, because HS 2000 or HS harmonizing classification is not based on religion or anything. So it is, for us, it's been 100% Muslim country. It is difficult us to apply HS regarding this. When human capacity, we have very few staff to conduct a wide range of information, or the knowledgeable staff on this area is limited, and lack of our tools. Next, please. So the basic assistance we are providing from our website, there's link provide for classification. It is linked with local names, so it is easy to search HS code, and tariff committees from our custom law. There's a tariff committee established in our customs where difficult product can be classified through this committee, and if the committee can't make a decision, it will be sent to WCO. And daily calls from our call center, HS classification will be provided, and if it is a difficult product, there we recommend to either send the detail from mail, and advance ruling is provided, and it will be available in our website for 1 year period. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Modip, Miss Faismas Naz Youssef, for your great contribution. Then I would like to invite the final speaker from United States, Mr. Justin Hoffman, Director for Industrial Goods at the Office of the United States Trade Representative. I would like to invite him at the podium, because he is now in Geneva. So thanks very much for your participation in person to Geneva.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all to those of you that are participating today here in Geneva and remotely, whatever time it is, wherever you are. So I wanted to give you all an introduction to how the HS amendments are incorporated into the United States tariff schedule. So in the U.S. system, under law, under the U.S. Constitution, Congress sets the tariff rates, but it has delegated some authorities to either to the Independent International Trade Commission to maintain the tariff schedule, and it's delegated some powers to the president to proclaim changes to the tariff schedule. So when the WCO approves modifications to the HS, the U.S. International Trade Commission, which is an independent body, independent of both the legislative and the executive branch, is charged with keeping the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States under continuous review and keeping it current. And so the International Trade Commission is responsible for recommending what changes need to be made to the harmonized tariff schedule. And then the President of the United States proclaims the changes into effect. So on this page here, this QR code, if you were to scan it, it'll take you to the International Trade Commission's website, which contains all the different documents related to the implementation of the HS 2022. Under our process, the International Trade Commission launched an investigation to prepare the modifications, and that happened in October of 2019. From there, the USITC then drafts recommendations on the changes that would take place in the schedule. And it's a very lengthy report, contains all the different deletions and additions and modifications to the subheadings. They produce a draft correlation table. And then following that, it goes out for public input. And the International Trade Commission invites input from the public through written comments to comment on any of the changes into the schedule. Once that input is received, the USITC then issues an updated report that reflects the final recommendations that is submitted then to the president. And under our system, there's a congressional review period. And so the final report, the final proposed modifications are submitted to the Congress. There's a certain period of time that the Congress can review those, after which the president may proclaim the changes to the tariff schedule. And under our system, once the changes are proclaimed, there's a 30-day period before they take effect. And this is pretty important because it gives time for customs to implement the changes into our electronic systems. It gives time for the trade to update their own systems and to be prepared for when the new nomenclature takes effect. So because in the United States, the proclamation was made by the president in late December, we did not implement the HS 2022 nomenclature until late January of this year. So we were a little bit behind on that. So I would say one of the major challenges we have in our system is maintaining tariff neutrality. Under the law that delegated some of these authorities, Congress said that, any amendments have to be consistent with the harmonized convention, anything that the WCO has recommended for adoption, the changes have to be consistent with sound nomenclature policy, and ensuring substantial rate neutrality. And any change of rate, if there was a necessary change to a duty rate, then that must be consequent or necessitated by nomenclature modifications recommended under the process. And the ITC is also charged with ensuring that any modification doesn't alter existing conditions of competition for the affected industry, labor, or trade. And so to maybe summarize that is to ensure things don't really change in terms of competition of tariff rates. And so I'm going to show you an example here with the implementation of HS 2022. And this is for the new heading created for additive manufacturing for 3D printers. And with the creation of the new heading and several subheadings specific to the type of material being used by these 3D printers, you can see that in HS 2017, the US schedule, and I had to truncate some of these descriptions just to fit them on the page, but there was machinery for working the products. And in the United States, we had one set of machinery for rubber plastics. And then there was a different 8-digit national tariff line that where the machinery that worked the other products was classified. The glass, the cement, plaster, and ceramics. And then there were separate tariff lines for the parts of those machines. And with the creation of this new heading and subheadings in HS 22, you can see with the blue lines, a lot of those were carried over from where they existed previously. And I'll point out at the very bottom of the right column were the new codes created for parts. And this is an example where we maintain tariff rate neutrality because under the previous version of the harmonized system, parts of machines the parts of the 3D printers that use plastic or rubber had a 3.1% tariff. But the parts of the machines, the 3D printers that basically produced everything else, other than plastics and rubber were duty-free. And so in order to maintain that tariff neutrality, when the parts subheading 84, 85, 90 was created, we then created two national tariff lines to maintain the 3.1% tariff versus the duty-free tariff. So a colleague from Ecuador had just mentioned how in their system, they meet together and determine where maybe new rates are necessary. But in our system, we maintain tariff rate neutrality across the board. In terms of public input, I touched upon this a bit earlier. As I noted, the proposed recommendations are posted to the USITC's website, and the public comment is invited to comment on those. Other federal agencies are also invited to comment, and the ITC gives consideration to each of these comments and makes any necessary changes. And if you see the final recommendation to the president, the ITC actually copies all of those public comments into the final report. And so you can see them all in one place. And the ITC's report will also talk about if any of the comments led to modifications between the sort of the first draft and the final draft. And that has happened on occasion. In the HS 17 updates to the US schedule, there were some changes made due to public comment for technical reasons. There were also some statistical subheadings in our schedule that we maintained because industry thought that they were important to them. In terms of interagency coordination, I would say it happens all throughout the process. The International Trade Commission and US Customs Service, they're the ones who participate in the WCO proceedings. But before they participate in any WCO meetings, they'll consult with the interagency. In the US system, we have what's called the Trade Policy Staff Committee. It's a statutory interagency system that discusses trade policy issues. And so the ITC and US Customs will consult as they're preparing for various WCO meetings. The interagency is also coordinated throughout the ITC's process. Agencies with special expertise will be called in. Department of Agriculture, for example, on agricultural issues or issues affecting our agricultural TRQs, for example. The Department of Health and Human Services might be asked to consult on technical issues involving pharmaceuticals or medical devices. And then once the final recommendations are produced, then the ITC will consult with the interagency on promulgating those, on issuing those. Whether it's, as I mentioned, US Customs and Border Protection, who's responsible for implementing the schedule and applying the tariff rates, to my office, the Office of the US Trade Representative, which handles the congressional consultation process. And we help to draft the proclamation that goes to the White House for the president ultimately to proclaim and implement these changes. So that's the end of my presentation, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman, for your presentation. It's very useful and informative presentation. Unfortunately, we are now behind the schedule. So if you members have a question and a comment, please use the Q&A function. And if you put the question and answer, we revert at the end of the session today. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoffman. And then let's move on to the next session. Next session is session 3. We have heard from members about their national experience with the implementation of the HS changes at the domestic level. And then we now turn to the WTO Secretariat to guide us through the objectives and the mechanic of the HS transposition exercise in the Committee on Market Access. To commence this session, I'd like to invite three experts from the WTO Secretariat. First presenter is from Market Access Division, Mr. Roy Santana. Everybody knows very well, I think, to tell us more about the purpose and objective of transposing WTO goods schedules into new version of the HS. I'd like to invite Roy. Roy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just jump directly. So I call this the presentation on the two purple books. One of them used by customs regularly, and the other one used regularly also by the trade people. So why is it that the WTO is talking today about the HS if this is an issue that is really taken care by Brussels, no, by our colleagues from the WTO? So let me give you a bit of context, because I think it's important. Perhaps we have many customs officers that know about the customs part and the trade officers that know about the trade part. So we'll try to give you some information to fill in the gaps in terms of the knowledge very, very quickly. So for us in the GATT before and the WTO, customs nomenclatures have always been very important. If you are going to be negotiating tariffs and exchanging tariff concessions, it's very important to try to have a common language, right? So tariff nomenclatures have been in use for many, many years, but many times they were not really universally accepted. They were not common. And in fact, what used to happen is that each country had its own tariff nomenclature. So you can imagine if you are discussing at the international level, 2, 3, maybe you manage. The moment you're talking about 23, 100 countries, it becomes a very unmanageable type of process, right? The first effort we had, and I think Gael did not talk about the history, I'm not going to go into the details, but there was a first effort that was done in 1931, League of Nations. They tried to develop a nomenclature, which was then the basis of the Brussels tariff nomenclature that at some point became known as the CCCN, so the Customs Cooperation Council nomenclature, that then evolved in the 70s because it was not really satisfying the needs of the trading community. And then the harmonized system was developed in 1983 with a view that it would enter into force in 1988. So they really gave a lot of time for this to be implemented in practice. You saw the explanation by the colleagues that are in capitals as to how difficult it is today with computers. Just imagine doing this job without computers and relying with a lot of paper and without really having resources and information to ask. So it was a really tremendous challenge faced by customs. And also for the GATT negotiators, they said, look, if we have tariff concessions that we are supposed to oversee, and then all the customs all around the world are going to be changing the way in which they express those tariff concessions, then of course it's for us to adapt to what is being used by the customs from that point onwards. So there was this decision that was discussed in 1983 that talks about the introduction of the harmonized system into our schedules of concession, right? So we take the HS, is something developed somewhere else, and every time they have something, it's us who need to adapt to what has been done by customs. So this is just to give you a quick introduction in terms of the context. So I think probably some of you may have seen this slide before. The HS is important in terms of tariffs. We have several different areas where the harmonized system has been used by different agreements. I'm not going to stop too much on this because I have Roberta looking at me. Also, just to tell you very quickly, what we're talking about here is we have these legal instruments where the tariff concessions are embodied. Not only tariff, we also have other concessions. And then these are annexed to the GATT. They are also annexed to the WTO agreement. So they are an integral part of an international agreement. So the question is, how do we deal with changes to this international agreement that result from changes that are necessary from this new application of a different type of nomenclature by customs, right? And then these legal instruments we have in the WTO, some of the main obligations we have are what we call bound duties, which are the legal maximum that a WTO member can implement with respect to a particular tariff line. Not all tariff lines are bound. We have some members that have tariff lines which are unbound. That means there is no legal maximum on them. And the big question for us, again, is how do we update these legal obligations? I just wanted to show you, perhaps many of you have never seen this picture. This is a signing ceremony when the Uruguay round was concluded. This was done in Marrakesh. And what you have on the table is something like 25,000 pages. And that's not many copies. That's one copy of the WTO agreement. So I told you that the WTO schedules are an integral part of the WTO agreement, so that you see the WTO agreement in full with the 25,000 pages. So the agreement itself, the purple book that you have, doesn't really change, except for some agreements that we occasionally have. Trade facilitation agreement was one of them. We may also have the fishery agreements once it enters into force, but the large bulk of paper you see on that table is by far, like 22,000 of those pages, these schedules of concessions in terms of goods, right? So this notion of the bound duties. And most of them are expressed using the harmonized system. So I have here an example of the schedule of concessions of Canada. And you see that that part that you have on the left expresses the, let's say, tariff nomenclature used by Canada at the time, which I think was HS92. And then in HS92, you have those, then on the right, the tariff concessions and also concessions on other duties and charges expressed based on that nomenclature. So now, I think many have used this term transposition. So what exactly is that? So I think Gael already explained well why the harmonized system changes, just to show my little collection of different versions of the books. Every time you have a change in the HS, many aspects have to be adjusted. Session 2 was telling you how this process is done at the domestic level. So you typically end up having some form of law, decree, or other type of legal instrument that is then put into place. It becomes implemented up to a certain point. And then this is applied from that moment onwards by customs, right? So typically this exercise for them is more one looking from what we have today, what we're going to start having up to a certain point, from a certain point. At the WTO, we have a similar exercise. So if we have those schedules of concessions expressing tariff concessions in a certain version of the HS, then we also need to adjust that to express it in the new version to ensure there is comparability between both of them. And this exercise typically is a mix of looking forward, but also there's a lot of looking backwards in terms of what type of concessions we had in the previous version of the nomenclature. Now, by transposition, and I think this is a word we have perhaps not defined, we have kept using it, but we haven't said what it is. I think one of the previous speakers used the word translate. I think that's perhaps the best word that we have. So if the idea is you try to express in the new version of the nomenclature what you had in the previous version of the nomenclature. Again, and I think what it's interesting in terms of our process is that this one is approved by consensus. So that means 164 members have to agree to the changes that you have. And one challenge, perhaps if I can already talk about that we see is that many times the people who were working at the domestic level doing the transposition are not the people involved at the WTO level when they are discussing how to transpose this legal instrument at our level. Another part that I think we have not mentioned yet is that when we talk about the HS changing from one version to the other, is typically around 10%. It can be more, it can be less, depending on the version. It doesn't mean that it's the entire version of the entire HS changing. Gael and her team in Brussels, typically they focus on specific products, specific chapters that they want to review. And then the process that we do here in Geneva is also based on only the tariff lines that were affected and changed as a result of that particular amendment to the HS. We also have some principles which are embodied in typically one of the annex of the procedures that we have. And then the main one we have is that these changes in principle are meant to be neutral. And what I have there is actually a copy and paste of a sentence we have in the latest version of the procedures. And it says that if the concessions of the original HS 2017 tariff lines are different, the concession elements of the new HS 2022 tariff lines should reflect this, right? So the idea is just like when you translate something from your language into English or the other way around, you are supposed to be saying the same. However, there is also room for flexibility, and our procedures say when it's unavoidable, you have to, for some reason, to combine tariff lines or part of the different tariff lines. There are 4 methodologies that were envisaged since 1983 to be able to deal with this type of situation. One of them is choosing the lowest tariff. So imagine in one of the examples, I think it was Ecuador that has it, it was 20, 10, and 0. So methodology 1 is just choose 0. This one ensures that no other member is going to complain, right? They're probably going to be happy because the new duty is going to be 0 for the 3 lines. But then, of course, your Ministry of Finance is the one that is probably not going to be very happy for the reasons that I think were mentioned before. The other methodologies have to do with using the arithmetic average or using a trade-weighted average and so on and so forth. We're not going to go into the details. It is also possible at some point to use simplifications, which are proposed by the Secretariat. And these simplifications are also discussed and agreed typically by members through a document we call the Notes on Methodology. And this is because sometimes the changes are so complex that it's really very difficult to keep fully, let's say, all the details with respect to the tariff concessions without touching anything. So sometimes what we do is propose to simplify those by some methodologies that my colleague Eric, I think at some point is going to explain. And the key part here again is, even if you have those simplifications, these are going to be reviewed at some point by the other members, and everything has to be approved by consensus. And what has happened sometimes in previous occasions is that sometimes members are concerned because through the simplification, you may have situations where a product that used to be subject to a relatively low duty, because of these methods, end up paying a higher duty, which might, of course, be quite important for another member. And because of the consensus rule, basically the procedure stops until the 2 members get together and sort out what the possible solution could be to deal with this situation. In terms of the steps, here I'm just going to do it super quick, just to let you know that there are 2 ways in which this can happen. Either the Secretariat can do all the technical work and the member reviews the work by the Secretariat, and this is actually done by Alia and her team, or the member can prepare their own file, and then this is subject to review by the Secretariat, right? So there's 2 options. The one that is used by far the most is the one where the Secretariat does the technical work, and then this is reviewed by members. After the files have been prepared, they are released then for the other members to look at the file. And remember, this is done by consensus. So the procedures are only concluded once there are no objections to the files that have been put forward. We do this through some special meetings of the Committee on Market Access, which are called HS multilateral review sessions. Once there are no more objections on these files, then they move forward to the formal procedures, which are the 1980 procedures, where we actually use that procedure to modify, from a legal point of view, the agreement and include the changes into the schedule of concessions. Sorry, I'm very mindful of the time. I'm trying to go as quickly as possible. I don't even see Roberta, but I know she's watching me. So just to tell you very quickly, in terms of resources, we have done quite a big effort to try to help you as much as possible. So we have, if you're looking for information on schedules of concessions, we have this Good Schedules e-library, where you can find a wealth really of information on all the issues that we have been discussing, including on the transposition. So you can even find information by specific members, by procedures, etc. In terms of the HS transpositions, we have one section where you can actually go and see for any member. I don't know, for example, Afghanistan, which is the first one, you can see that they joined for the first time with a schedule that was in HS 2012. And you can see that HS 2017 was already introduced and the procedures finalized, certified. If you go down the line, you see other members where some of the other procedures are pending. So this one is quite helpful if you want to see exactly what's the status of a particular member. Typical question we get is, how do I get a copy of that schedule of concessions? I need it in Excel because I need to use it for example, comparing the work that we're going to be doing for purposes of transposition. If you go to the member profile for any member, there is always a little tab that is called Consolidated Tariff Schedule File, where it is possible to download in Excel format a copy of the CTS file, or the basically electronic version of the schedule of concessions in database format in the latest certified version of the schedule. So for example, for Afghanistan, this is going to be in HS 2017. For the other members that are behind, is going to be in the latest certified version. We get many questions in terms of resources. Where do I get those notes on methodology? The correlation tables by the WCO. Well, if you know where to get them from the WCO, you go to WCO. If not, you can come here. We also have copies that are provided by the WCO, and we try to keep all the information under this section in a relatively straightforward way for you to be able to use it. And the last part, and this was also developed by our colleagues from the Market in Access Intelligence section, together with the WCO. So we have this system that allows you to visualize in a relatively easy way the changes across time, across different versions of the harmonized system. So if you want to see, for example, what happened with respect to a particular code, where is it coming from, or how is it going to be expressed in the next versions of the transposition, you can also use this tool that will probably simplify your life. I apologize, I went a bit, perhaps hopefully not too quick, Mr. Chairman, but I did the best I could. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy, for your very informative presentation. Then let me now give the floor to Ms. Aria and Mr. Eric Singh from the Market Access Intelligence section of the Economic Research and Statistics Division. Aria and Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So I will continue on the transposition of the schedules of concession in the WTO by describing a bit the procedure. So for each HS change, the WTO will issue a document, a decision on the HS version that is changed. So in this case, we will look at this decision for HS 2017. So in this document, you will have an information, many types of information. For example, it will say that the transposition work, which comprises the transposition of bound duties, tariff quotas, and export subsidies. This transposition work is always based on the schedule of the concession of a member, and this, as we have seen in Roy's presentation, is always based on the CTS database. So the latest schedule of the member is reflected in the CTS database, and the CTS database, you can access it either on the Good Schedule e-library, as we have seen, but also on another tool that we have, which is called the Tariff Analysis Online, where you can download the CTS database, either in an Access format or in Excel format. Now, in the procedure, in the decision in HS 2017, we also explain that the Secretariat at the beginning of the exercise will prepare a comprehensive set of information on HS 17 and make it available to members in another tool, which is called the IDB File Exchange Facility. So this comprehensive set of information will include information on the nomenclature, HS 2017 and HS 2012 on the new one and the previous one. And it will include also model tables of the transposition file. And I think, yes, this will be the information which will be made available. The decision also says that the Secretariat will transpose the schedule of members except for those who prepare their own transposition. And this will be done in line with the notes on methodology, which are included in document G/MA/366. The members for whom the Secretariat has prepared the file are expected to examine their file and either approve the file or provide comments. And the Secretariat will review the draft files prepared by the members. And at the end of the process, as we have seen in Roy's presentation, there will be a multilateral review in the Committee on Market Access. For this multilateral review, the file to be examined needs to be posted a minimum of 6 weeks on the tariff analysis online before the meeting. And during the meeting, if the file is approved by all members, then there is a certification process. So again, it will go through the 1980 procedures. And if there are no comments from members after a period of 3 months, then the file will be certified. So this is actually a little diagram of what we just discussed. So for the files that the Secretariat prepares, it will be sent to the members and then the member has 60 days to review the file. If we have no reply from the member, or if the file is approved by the member within this 60-day period, then the file can be posted to TAO and will be reviewed in multilateral review. If there are specific comments from the member, then the period can be extended up to 90 days. And the idea will be for the Secretariat and the member to try to find a common understanding. So if when a common understanding is reached and there is no change to the file, then the file will be issued by the Secretariat and with a head note saying that the file has been approved by the member, and it will go later to multilateral review. If a common understanding is reached, but there are changes to the file, then the Secretariat will issue a revised file and also issue it for multilateral review. Now, if we have changes to the file and if the member and the Secretariat do not find a common understanding, then the file will be revised, including the changes requested by the member, including also a table with the Secretariat's observations, and the file will be issued also for multilateral review. Now, just a few elements that we encounter when when we prepare the files. I mean, this is something that many members in the transposition file, the tariff line nomenclature which is used is not necessarily aligned on the applied tariff nomenclature. And for many members, this is an issue because they come back to us asking to align the nomenclature of the transposition file to the one of the applied tariff. And this is, I mean, a tariff line link would be very, very comprehensive and very long to do for all the files that we have to prepare. So the objective of this exercise is not to align on the applied tariff. It is rather to reflect the new, the concessions, the existing tariff duties and other concessions in the new version of the nomenclature, but not to necessarily align. However, we use the applied tariff that the members submit to IDB as a reference when we have difficulty in finding a product description, or when we want to see how it was done in the applied tariff, we will look at the applied tariff of the member as a reference, as a model to find the new description. So this brings me to the other point, is the difficulty sometimes in providing product descriptions in the new version of the nomenclature when we have many candidate lines or when we have multiple bound duties. It is sometimes not easy to define an exact product description. And the third point is that sometimes the transposition results in very detailed and complex tariff structure, which is even more complex than the applied tariff, and therefore is not used by customs. So this is because of the different bound duties or different elements in the concessions. And we had, as an example, in HS 2002, with the HS 2002 changes in the chapter on paper, chapter 48, there were many changes in the length and the weight of paper, and this had led us to create too detailed and too complex nomenclature in the transposition. So for the following exercises, I mean, we try to to improve, I mean, the way we do the transposition. Now, this is for the files which were prepared by the Secretariat. Now, for the files prepared by members, we also encounter some issues. At this point, as we have worked on HS 2002, 2007, 2012, 2017, and soon 2022, we will start 2022, we realize that for many members that prepare their own file, we are several transpositions behind. I mean, we are lacking a few exercises. So yes, it will become, I mean, important for these files to to be up to date. We also have an issue for these files is to make sure that the starting point that is used by the member when they prepare their file is the last CTS file that we have for that member. Because in some cases, we will have a number of updates if, for example, if a member has implemented ITA expansion, if the IT expansion commitments are not reflected in the CTS file, for example, in HS 2007, then the CTS file in HS 2012, we will miss a number of updates or corrections when we prepare the HS 2000, when we review the HS 2012 file. So this is important to reflect in to use the latest CTS file, because it will reflect all the commitments of that member. The CTS file also is important because the correlation table provided by members should match in the starting point in the CTS nomenclature. We also note inconsistencies sometimes between the transposition file and the correlation table in terms of HS codes. So this also is an element that we see. the verification report, which is prepared by the Secretariat and sent to the member on their submission, is very detailed and very complex. It's sometimes one problem can be dealt with in different, and I mean, it includes a number of sheets, and it is it is not an easy report to examine by the member. And the process finally to finalize the file for the files prepared by members can be very long. And this is because we have a number of exchanges between the member and the Secretariat, and it easily exceeds 1 year. Now, this is, I will conclude with this last slide. This is just the current situation of the transposition of schedules. So you will see that in HS 96, we have only one file pending. This is the same in HS 2002. HS 2017, we have 13 files pending, 30 in HS 2012 and 59 in HS 2017. I will now let my colleague Eric continue with the more details on the transposition exercise.
Thank you, Adia. I have 6 minutes to present to you what the WTO does for the HS 2017 transposition. Okay. Where do we start? We start first with the WCO, the correlation table provided by the WCO. On the screen, you have an extract for ginseng. You have the code for HS 17 and the code for HS 12 and the reasons for the change. Here we know that subheading 12, 11, 20 in HS 17 is correlated to 2 different subheadings in HS 12. But this format is not good enough for a computer program. What we want to do in the Secretariat, we want to automatize as far as possible the maximum number of cases. We want to do it automatically. So we do retranscribe this correlation in a different way. This is how we do. Here you have the HS 17 correlated with the HS 12 and the reasons for changes. We also add some further information. These are the status and the frequency. The status in HS 17, reused, it means that this code, this subheading existed before, but the product scope has changed. And then in HS 17, it can also be a new, the subheading has been created. However, in HS 12, it would be deleted, reused, or unchanged. Since we have that, what would be the product description of the product that is related to subheading 12, 11, 20 in HS 17 and related to 12, 11, 20 in HS 12? So we do provide a product description and a code for that. We try to do the work automatically, and we do it for all 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish. You can see the remarks from the WCO says that expansion of the scope of the heading 1211 to include chilled and frozen products. It means that chilled and frozen product originates from HS 12, 2008-99, and they are included in HS 17, 12, 11, 20. Therefore, this pair of correlation, we have a product description known as chilled or frozen, and this we will have in all 3 languages. This CTS contains many, many data elements. We can't even list them. It doesn't stand on the whole slide. So when we correlate, what we do is we retranscribe the information in the CTS. We have the certification flag, the base duty, bound duty, ODC, from and to for the implementation, SSGs for agricultural products, and then INRs. I just show you an example. That was ginseng, 12, 11, 20 in HS17. It's correlated to 12, 11, 20 in HS12 and 20 or 8, 99 in HS12 as well. It turns out that in that example, all the commitments are identical. They're all certified, and the bound duty is at 12%, ODC is at 0. In that case, we can transpose it automatically. We know that in HS17, for subheading 12, 11, 20, the bound duty would be 12, because all the candidate lines have the same duty. We don't need to go and read what are the products contained in subheading 20 or 899. Of course, we know that grapes are not linked to ginseng roots. Should we delete it from the correlation table? Well, if we do delete it, it wouldn't change the fact that the bound duty would stay at 12%. So this we will do. For those one, we do it automatically. Can we do more things automatically? Yes. For instance, in that example, you can see in HS12 that the bound duty for 12, 11, 20 is 12%. It happens that for subheading in HS12, 20 or 899, all the binding commitments are identical as well. Remember, we did have a kind of small template. We know that HS17, 12, 11, 20, that originates from HS12, 20 or 899. The product description should be chilled or frozen. So this we can do automatically. So those two cases we do automatically. When do we do things manually? We don't really like doing things manually because there's a lot of resources. We need to put in a lot of resources. And then the problem as well is when you do the transposition, you need a lot of screens. You need the HS17, you need the CTS in HS12 with all those data elements, and you need the WCO correlation table. So it's a lot of information. What we try to do is we try to put all those information in one sheet so that it's easier. In this example, you can see that the commitments are different. It's 12% if you are in HS12, 12, 11, 20. Otherwise, it varies from 37%, 0%, or 60%. In this one, we need to read the product description. But what we try to do is to put all the information in one page. It's easier. You don't need to go and look in different screens. So we provide the HS17 correlated with the HS12, and then you have the binding commitments. And then I just realized that my 6 minutes are gone. So this is the manual part. So we compare the product description. Are grapes linked to ginseng? No. So we put Y into delete. And then we would use a computer program to, by doing this, what we have done is we have manufactured the nomenclature in HS17, and we have also the correlation table. So this is when we do the work manually. Another example where we do things automatically is, Gail, you mentioned a one-to-one. This is an example of one-to-one. It's a pure renumbering. HS 2017, subheading 2949.7, sorry. HS17, subheading 2949.71 is linked to only one HS12. And this HS12 goes to only one HS17. So what does that mean? It's a pure renumbering of the HS code. Subheading 2939.91 in HS12 is renumbered as 2939.71. On the right, I have a part of a schedule. I don't need to understand the description. I just know that I can substitute the first 6 digit, I can substitute it by another 6 digit. And this can be done automatically as well. Okay, now, and then we have a number of examples like that. This is MCOs, terrible thing for us. And Gail mentioned this example. I guess in HS22, we have the same thing, but it's for flat screen, right? But that one was for HS17, and this is for MCOs. Basically, those products can come in particular, but not limited to so many subheadings. And this one, when you look at the nomenclature in HS12 and in HS17, they are almost identical. The only difference is in the head note, where the product scope is much bigger because it contains MCOs now. So what we did is we split all of these subheadings into 2. One part is MCOs, and the other part was excluding MCOs. And the part for MCOs is correlated in particular, but not exclusively, to those headings that we have in the WCO remarks. And of course, if you are a participant to the ITA expansion, then we know it's duty-free, because MCOs is part of the ITA expansion. So we do the transposition for a number of countries. When we do this transposition to those countries, we have to let them know what we have done automatically and what we are doing manually. So this is an example of how we do. On the left, under method, the first column, it's manual. So we have done it manually. And what have we done? We have correlated 12, 11, 20, 10, chill or frozen. We have correlated it with a national tariff line 2008, 99, 90. And you can see what we are providing. We are being transparent to the members. What have we done manually, or what we have done automatically. And that's my last slide. So we have done the HS 2017 transposition for more than 100 countries. We have done it on 104 farms. Out of those 104 farms, they constitute almost 1 million national tariff line. But hopefully, it's only 53,000 that were affected by change in HS 2017 amendments. And what is good for us, by candidate lines, it's HS 17 correlated to HS 12. It can be split into 2 or 3, so it's multiplied. So those 53,000 lines in HS 17, if you consider the candidate lines, then we have to transpose, read over 141,000 national tariff lines in English, French, or Spanish. So that's a lot. It's really a lot. But hopefully for us, when we do things automatically, as explained, most of them are done automatically. We had to read only 16,000 lines. Those 16,000 lines out of those 104 different files. But you don't see the bottom. Can we put it a little bit higher? No. No, we can't. So basically, we have 104 files, 16,000 lines all in all, but for 17 countries, everything is done automatically. And it happens that 1/10 of those 15,000 lines, 1/10 of those 15,000 lines relate to 60 different countries. So the good news is, with this method, the majority of countries can be done automatically. However, we have 3 countries, only those 3 countries, they constitute over almost 20% of those are tariff lines that have to be read automatically. And now I'm done. Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Alia and Eric, for your insightful presentation. Unfortunately, you broke the promise to block, not keeping that the time, the 6 minutes, but it's very useful presentation because HGS transposition matter is a very huge and hefty work, but you explained that in a very concise way. So I'd like to open the floor for this discussion because the HGS transposition matter is a very, very important. So I'd like to invite members to have a comment with this regard, but we have only 10 minutes, so we and also we have another one session. So quick, United States first, and then followed by Japan. United States, you have a floor.
Hi, my name is Brian Kane. I work at the U.S. International Trade Commission, which, as Justin mentioned, is responsible for maintaining the schedule. And so I just wanted to say from our experience, one of the most helpful resources is Alia and the Secretariat in working together to update our schedule. Another thing that is very helpful is making sure you gather all the resources from the WCO, WTO, and your national administrations and understanding what needs to change. And then just to comment that sometimes access can be very difficult to use. And so getting familiar with how access works and understanding how access can be helpful to your process can be really helpful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I invite Japan and then come back to Secretary. Japan.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I just would like to make a few comments here regarding HGS transposition procedure and also share our situation. While many members implement import procedures based on the latest HGS version of HGS 2022, some of them are in the process of transposing to the previous HGS version at the WTO. Japan is also one of the members who has this backlog in terms of HGS transposition exercise. In addition, in our case, for example, the transposition file approved by the WTO requires approval by the Diet as part of the domestic procedure. So more time is needed to complete the entire procedure. On the other hand, HGS transposition exercise is extremely technical and cannot be completed automatically using an IT system for all of the work, which must be done more or less manually, as Eric also described in his presentation. In order to better ensure such exercise, the multilateral review taking place at the Committee on Market Access is crucial with respect to that it allows us to work with the Secretariat in the process and to have these draft files reviewed by other members. So we believe that the HGS version approved by WTO catching up with the HGS version being implemented domestically as quick as possible will contribute to the proper implementation of the WTO commitment. Therefore, we believe it will be beneficial if multiple versions of HGS transposition could be completed in a single procedure. In this regard, we look forward to sharing this idea and discussing it with members on the occasion of upcoming HGS multilateral review in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. And then I think that the couple of issue from United States and Japan regarding the comment from United States, is there any experience or something from the WTO Secretariat to address the technical matter? Is there something?
Yes, so with respect to your comment on the access tool, on the access software, sorry, we do have the transposition files from the beginning were in Access and Excel format. And the CTS files recently, since I think 2 years, almost 2 years, we now also have them in Excel format because we realized then that Excel is used a lot more than Access. Thank you.
Thank you, Aria. Any other view and any other reaction regarding the comment made from Japan? They expressed their interest for I think that the multilateral review or something. Okay, then let's move on to the next session because we are now behind the time, behind the schedule. So next session is the last session. It's for the final one. I would like to invite again Miss Gael Gruby from the WCO to share some insights on the ongoing work at the WCO on HS 2027. So I think that you invite Gael at the podium. No, it's flexible as you want.
Just being quicker rather than take the time to change. Thank you. And first of all, my apologies to the Secretariat for all of the work you do. When you talk about just 16,000 lines or thereabouts, it's a massive amount of work. So I'm also going to apologise in advance for the amount of work you're going to be doing for HS 2022 because we have some really difficult ones in that. In terms of what's coming up in HS 2027, I was asked just to give a flavour of what we have coming up, and I'll do this in just a very few minutes. There is a lot of work in this one on the basis of environmental goods, or climate-related goods. So we have a lot on renewable technologies again. We also have a lot on foods because of the changes in climate security and the need to look at, agricultural trade as part of both environmental and climate adaptation. So there's going to be a lot of work in those areas. Some of the areas that we will continue to work in are, of course, the ongoing clarifications. And again, I apologise to my colleagues at the WTO because you just talked about changing alkaloids of non-vegetable origin, and we're going to change those again because we had some problems highlighted with the way that is structured. So there'll be a lot of clarification work. In terms of other things that, as I said, were environmentally related, we are looking at things like solar pumps, like heat pumps, looking at electric vehicles that use an internal combustion engine, but not as a propulsion engine. So they're accidentally falling into the all electric, even though they're not. So there's a lot of areas like that we're looking into. In addition, on top of that, we will do some cleanups of hard to classify things, Christmas tree lights, little things like this, overflow fusion glass, all these sort of things that you would think would be quite simple to classify, but actually are not simple to classify. The other big theme that is emerging is health related. And at the next RSC, we will start with some of the specific proposals, areas of proposal from the Committee of Market Access, including looking at face masks and respirators, and looking at ambulances and mobile clinics, but we're also looking more broadly at the area of medications. One of our members has brought through a very good, a very extensive change, so we have better knowledge of health goods coming across the border. So this will be a very large area of change. This, I think, is the two major themes, or three major themes. Environmental climate change adaptation, health, and some clarification. Marie really has some overdue cleanup of some of the more difficult areas of classification to help trade and to help the private sector and help our customs colleagues in areas that are quite difficult. That said, I'll also note that we're getting a large number of new proposals coming in just over the last few months, last few weeks, and we know there'll be more coming. So watch this space. It could be quite a dramatic last year of negotiations with a lot coming in. And that includes some coming in that have been inspired by the revision by UNSD of the statistical instruments as well. So we have areas to clean up there where there's not a good correlation possible between the statistical needs and the HS. So a very, very busy one, and we'll keep you up to date in the market access with what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gail, for your the presentation again. And then before we conclude the session, I received a couple of questions through the Q&A tool functions. So I'd like to invite Secretariat to read the question.
Thank you, Chair. We received a question addressed to the United States, which says, are there cases where tariff neutrality is challenging to meet and thus a deviation from the principle is necessary? If you can ask this question, respond to this question, thank you.
Sure, thank you for that question. I guess the short answer to that is no. We, seek to maintain tariff neutrality whenever possible. And so because of that, sometimes you'll see, due to transpositions, lots of national lines are created in order to maintain that tariff neutrality. And in some instances, we may create hypothetical tariff lines just because there's some sort of transposition taking place. There may not actually be goods that can meet the definition, but we essentially create very specific definitions, detailed definitions to maintain that tariff neutrality. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, United States. And any other question from the members? No? No. Only one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very briefly, there is a pending question in the chat for the WTO Secretariat, which is about whether the Secretariat can provide a list of the specific changes that are made when the Secretariat prepares the HS files for the members, because this will help smaller member states review these files.
Yes, in fact, we do. When we do the transposition for the member, we send back an Excel file. And in this Excel file, there are two worksheets where you can see whether the subheading in HS17, for instance, if it has been affected or transposed automatically or manually. So we do provide a flag. And then there's another worksheet, which we call align, and which aligns the HS17 together with the HS12. We have seen it in the presentation, and you can see which national subheading we retain for a specific HS17. Yes, we do provide this information to members when we transpose their file, and we send them back the transposed file.
Thank you, Secretariat. And I forget to react to the presentation from the second presentation from the Gaira regarding the ongoing work of the HS 2027. So is there members to make a comment or question to Gaira for the ongoing HS 2027 exercise in WCO?
We have a question.
Oh, I have a question from the Q&A. Simon, would you read
So we have Juan Ignacio who raised his hand. If you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Seems Juan Ignacio lowered his hand, so might have raised his hand by accident. Are there any other questions or comments from the floor or via the Q&A? If not, I give the floor back to the chair for some. There's some guy who wants to respond on this.
Thank you. I think that Gail raised a hand. Gail, you have a floor.
Thank you. Just one very quick comment in response to what Japan had said earlier. There are occasions, not frequently, but there are occasions when our members jump editions within the HS. So they'll go from, say, 2012 to 2022. So in those cases, they don't even have an HS edition in between in their national tariff. So that may also support the idea of doing multiple editions at once. It's rare, but it happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your Gail's comment. Take note of your comment. Anyway, this discussion maybe in the future somewhere we will address this matter. Thank you very much. Let me conclude the session. Thank you all for your active participation and the contribution to this workshop. Today's session highlighted many interesting aspects, starting with the introduction to the HS and its amendment procedures, following on to members' experiences with HS amendments at the national level and the HS transposition in the context of the WTO, and concluding with the ongoing work at the WCO with respect to upcoming HS 2027. As the chair of the CMA, I believe that this workshop has strengthened our understanding of the HS transposition processes, which should also help members proceed with adopting HS 2022 at the national level, and also get ready to prepare and review the HS 2022 transposition files in the committee. The WTO Secretariat team stands ready to assist members with any further questions and concerns to ensure a successful transition work by all members. Having said that, I also thank the endorsement for the overwork for interpreter, because we already it's time to finish just the 5 minutes or 6 minutes over the original time. Thank you very much for the interpreter. And then with that, I would like to thank you all again, and look forward to seeing all members tomorrow at the formal meeting of the CMA. Thank you very much. Meeting finished. Thanks.